to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
Hello, my darlings. Today I thought I would bring you some Irish fairy tales. My voice isn't quite up to snuff, and I apologize to that. But, yeah, it's been a rough couple of weeks. But I'm very, very glad to be back. Anyway, on we go. The Horned Women. A rich woman sat up late one night, carding and preparing wool. While all of the family and servants were asleep, suddenly a knock was given at the door and a voice called, "Open! Open!" "Who's there?" said the woman of the house. "I am the Witch of One Horn," was answered. The mistress, supposing that one of her neighbors had called and required assistance, because that's how you announce yourself to neighbors apparently, opened the door and a woman entered, having in her hand a pair of wool carders and bearing a horn on her forehead. As if growing there, she sat down by the fire in silence and began to card the wool with violent haste. Suddenly she paused and said aloud, "Where are the women? They delay too long." Then a second knock came to the door, and a voice called as before, "Open! Open!" The mistress felt herself obliged to rise and open to the call, and immediately a second witch entered, having 2 horns on her forehead, and in her hand a wheel for spinning wool. "Give me the place," she said. "I am the Witch of the 2 Horns." And she began to spin as quick as lightning. And so the knocks went on, and the call was heard, and the witches entered, until at last 12 women sat around the fire, the first with 1 horn, the last with 12 horns, and they carded the thread, and turned their spinning wheels, and wound and wove, and sang together in ancient rhyme. But no word did they speak to the mistress of the house. Strange to hear and frightful to look upon were these 12 women with their horns and their wheels, and the mistress felt near to death. And she tried to rise that she might call for help, but she could not move, nor could she utter a word or cry, for the spell of the witches was upon her. Then one of them called to her in Irish and said, "Rise, woman, and make us a cake." Then the mistress searched for the vessel to bring water from the well that she might mix the meal and make the cake, but she could find none. And they said to her, "Take a sieve and bring water in it." And she took the sieve and went to the well, but the water poured from it, and she could fetch none from the cake. She sat bound by the well and wept. Then a voice came to her and said, "Take yellow clay and moss and bind them together, and plaster the sieve so that it will hold." This she did, and the sieve held water for the cake. And the voice said again, "Return, and when thou comest to the north angle of the house, cry aloud 3 times and say, 'The mountains of the Fenian women and the sky over it all is on fire.'" And she did so. When the witches inside heard the call, the great and terrible cry broke from their lips, and they rushed forth with wild lamentations and shrieks, and fled away to Silvanon, where was their chief abode. But the spirit of the well bade the mistress of the house to enter and prepare her home against enchantments of the witch, if they returned again. At first, to break their spell, she sprinkled the water in which she had washed her child's feet, the feet water outside the door on the threshold. Secondly, she took the cake which, her absence, the witches had made a meal mix with the blood drawn from the sleeping family, and she broke the cake in bits and placed a bit in the mouth of each sleeper, and they were restored. And she took the cloth they had woven and placed it in half and half out of the chest with the padlock. And lastly, she secured the door with a great crossbeam fastened in the jambs, so that the witches could not enter. And having done these things, she waited. Not long were the witches in coming back, and they raged and called for vengeance. "Open! Open!" they screamed. "Open! Feet water!" "I cannot," said the feet water. "I am scattered on the ground, and my path is down to the law." "Open, open, wooden trees and beams," they cried to the door. "I cannot," said the door, "for the beam is fixed in the jamb, and I have no power to move." "Open, open, cake we have made, and mingled with blood," they cried again. "I cannot," said the cake, "for I am broken and bruised, and my blood is on the lips of sleeping children." Then the witches rushed through the air with great cries, and fled back to Silvermon, uttering strange curses on the spirit of the well, who had wished their ruin, but the women of the house were left in peace, and a mantle dropped by one of the witches in her flight, and was kept hung up by the mistress in memory of that night. And this mantle was kept by the same family from generation to generation for 500 years after. That is an interesting story. Sounds like the dwarves coming to Bilbo's house one at a time. The Shepherd of Mid-Davai. Up in the Black Mountains of Carmarthenshire lies a lake known as Llyn Van Vach. To the margins of the lake, the shepherd of Mid-Davai once led his lambs and played there whilst they sought pasture. Suddenly, from the dark waters of the lake, he saw 3 maidens arise, shaking the bright drops from their hair and gliding to the shore. They wandered about among his flock. They had more than mortal beauty, and he was filled for love with her that came nearest to him. He offered her the bread he had with him, and she took it and tried it, but then sang to him, "Hard-baked is thy bread, 'tis not easy to catch me," and then ran off laughing to the lake. The next day he took with him bread not so well done, and watched for the maidens. And when they came ashore, he offered his bread as before, and the maiden tasted it and sang, "Unbaked is thy bread, I will not have thee," and again disappeared into the waves. The third time did the shepherd of Mid-Davai try to attract the maiden, and this time he offered her bread that he had found floating about near the shore. Ooh, soggy bread. This pleased her, and she promised to become his wife if he were able to pick her out from among her sisters on the following day. When the time came, the shepherd knew his love by the strap of her sandal, and she told him she would be as good a wife to him as any earthly maiden could be, unless he would strike her 3 times without cause. Of course, he deemed that this could never be, and she, summoning the lake 3 cows, 2 oxen, and a bull as her marriage portion, was led homeward by him as his bride. The years passed happily, and 3 children were born to the shepherd and the lake maiden. But one day, here were going to christen, and she said to her husband it was far to walk, so he told her to go for the horses. "I will," she said, "if you bring me my gloves, which I've left in the house." When he came back with the gloves, he found that she had not gone for the horses, so he tapped her lightly on the shoulder with the gloves and said, "Go, go." "That's one," she said. Another time they were at a wedding, which suddenly the lake maiden fell a-sobbing and a-weeping, amid the joy and mirth all around her. Her husband tapped her on the shoulder and asked, "Why do you weep?" "Because they are entering into trouble, and trouble is upon you, for that is the 2nd causeless blow you have given me. Be careful, the 3rd is the last." The husband was careful never to strike her again, but one day at a funeral, she suddenly burst out into fits of laughter. Her husband forgot and touched her rather roughly on the shoulder, saying, "Is it time for laughter?" "I laugh," she said, "because those that die go out of trouble, but your trouble has come. The last blow has been struck. Our marriage is at an end, so farewell." And with that, she rose up and left the house and went to their home. Then she looked upon her home, called to the cattle she had brought with her. "Brindle cow, white speckled, spotted cow, bold freckled, old white face and gray Gergen, and the white bull from the king's coast, gray ox and black calf, all follow me home. Now the black calf had just been slaughtered and was hanging on the hook, but it got off the hook alive and well and followed her, and the oxen, though they were plowing, trailed the plow with them and did her bidding. So she fled to the lake again. They followed her, and with them plunged into the dark waters. And to this day is the furrow seen in which the plow was left dragging across the mountains to Tarn. Only once did she come again, when her sons were grown to manhood, and then she gave them gifts of healing, by which they won the name of Medigon, Medivai, the physicians of Medivai. Well, my darlings, this is a short one, but a coughing fit or two has caught me to the point where I gotta keep it here. Again, I'm so sorry for last week. I will try not to get behind like that again. Thank you so much for joining me. And I should have some Bear Lair up on Saturday, I hope. Thank you so kindly for stopping by my chateau, my darlings. It does mean so much to me. Please, if you have not subscribed, as many of you have not, please do so. Give me a like so I know what you would like to hear. And comment. I always love to read your comments. And special thanks to my Patreon and membership supporters. Ciao, darlings.